name is Jason J. Rock Houston, and you're listening to Chaotic Riff Magazine. We can be found on the web at www.chaoticriff.com. And our special guest tonight is Mr. Speed drummer Quinton Kufahl. How are you doing tonight, Quinton?
I'm great, Jason. Thanks for having me. How are you?
I'm doing great. Now, we are talking to you tonight, as I said, because you were the drummer from the Kiss tribute band, Mr. Speed. And Mr. Speed is one of the premier tributes to Kiss. I mean, you got a history of over 20 years. You haven't been with the band that long, but you're part of the band now. That's why we're talking. 2019 marks the 45th anniversary of Kiss's second album, Hotter Than Hell. And I thought it'd be fun to talk to you a little bit tonight. And Peter Criss has quite a, the Kiss drummer who you play the role in, Mr. Speed, has quite a bit of a presence on that album. So I thought it'd be fun to talk to you. So first of all, we know you're a Kiss fan, but where does Hotter Than Hell kind of land on your radar as far as favorite Kiss albums?
That's a great question. It's definitely not towards the top.
Okay.
Even though there's so many great songs on it, the production quality of it,
yeah,
it's probably the worst of any Kiss album, unfortunately.
Wow.
To that, it has some beautiful moments, and it has some heavier edge that maybe the first album didn't have, and that other future albums don't have. So it's kind of like an interesting time capsule piece, especially considering they really didn't have much money at that point.
Yeah.
And they just kind of had to work with what they had.
Yeah, Kiss today is very much a band that can pretty much do anything it wants. Or like you say, back in 1974, they were just starting out, and they kind of had to do what they were told. And I mean, a lot of people could imagine Kiss without makeup, but back then, even when they were putting out, the first album, and Hotter Than Hell, they were signing the record deal. People were telling them, you guys got a great band, but you really think you need that makeup? Well, and it's kind of interesting because if you look from the time of the very first Kiss album to Hotter Than Hell, you can see the makeup was somewhat perfected by the second album.
For sure, yeah. I know the questionable makeup decision was definitely around for the first album, but I think by the second album, Neil Bogart and Bill Coyne were definitely on board with, it's clearly not going away, and that's kind of their thing. So, but yeah, it's interesting to always look at older photos like that and see the evolution from 1973, even 72, when they were just experimenting, all the way to, up until, let's say, even Dynasty with Ace adding blue, and how the designs changed to fit their faces and everything. I find that to be very interesting. And
I mean, obviously, all four of them kind of, not so drastically, but the makeup designs kind of altered over the years. But I would say the ones that were the most drastic would obviously, like if you go back and look at the very first Kiss album, would be Peter Criss and Paul Stanley, especially Paul with that bandit makeup, and then for years now since he's been known with the to have the star.
For sure, yeah. I think I believe they had a makeup artist do Peter's makeup for that first album, and I'm not really sure why that decision was made. I'm positive it's probably in a book somewhere. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of interesting to look at the album cover, because not just the perfection of the makeup over years, but I mean, I think it was for its time. Probably the only other band that really had been made up like that previously was maybe Alice Cooper. And as Paul has discussed in interviews over years, we kind of took what Alice did, but we magnified it, because Alice was just one guy in the band, where we thought we're going to have four guys in the band get made up. Right.
And Peter's makeup, although it looks kind of very simple, like you said, it's very interesting to look back at those photos now, because as simplistic as it might be, I think those are great looking photos. Just to look at them for back in 1974, when they were kind of developing their look and their sound. Now, I was curious, Quinton, when you first got into Kiss, how much of it was about the look versus the music, or was it equally as important to you?
Hard to say. I mean, I was just a kid when I discovered Kiss.
Yeah.
But I don't think I'd like it as much if it was purely looks-based. I think there has to be something more than just looking at something cool, because otherwise, things like that can lose their flair. It's like if you meet a pretty girl and you find out that she really has no personality, then
Yeah.
it doesn't get very far. So
Yeah, and it's interesting because, like, to me as a fan, you listen to a lot of those early albums. I mean, it's great in the sense that it's really raw. It's when the band was kind of just just cutting their teeth and seeing what they could do. I mean, you look at the debut album, for example, and there's really not a bad song on there. I mean, you got Strutter, you got Black Diamond, and then you got a song that's kind of really different in the sense of, like, let's say, Nothing to Lose. I don't know, that's kind of got a little bit of a country twang. It's a little different of a Gene Simmons type song, but it all seems to fit, if you know what I mean.
for sure, yeah. I mean, they had quite a few years to pull those songs together, so it's a no-brainer why a lot of bands' first albums are their best, because they have so much time to develop.
Yeah, I've heard a phrase a lot of times. People will say, when you put out your debut album, you've kind of had your whole life to write these songs. And a lot of times people get together, they record the debut album, and that's really the best stuff of their career, because the more you advance, and people might alter the sound, they might start to follow trends or whatever the case may be. And it's kind of interesting, like, because you're a musician and I'm not. Like you tell me, if you listen to Hotter Than Hell, it's really, kind of the production's really not up to par. As a fan, I'm not really able to pick that up as easily as you, but it's kind of interesting. I've been doing research for this interview tonight. I was reading something on the internet where it said, all the guys in Kiss being from New York, like you said, the producers they were working with, Richie Weiss and Kenny Kerner, on those first two Kiss albums, by the time they got ready to make Hotter Than Hell, these guys moved out to Los Angeles, and that's why Kiss had to move out to Los Angeles to record the Hotter Than Hell album. And the guys weren't really happy about it. They were preferred to stay in New York. They didn't like being in Los Angeles, so that kind of probably explains for some of that. Now, the interesting thing I always thought about Hotter Than Hell, I did like a lot of songs, especially when you consider that a lot of people may not realize how involved Ace Frehley was with the songwriting on that album. I mean, he's a writer like on Parasite, Strange Ways, and if, I think Coming Home, he co-wrote with Paul Stanley. And back in the early days, Ace really wasn't comfortable. He had no desire whatsoever to be a lead singer, and because of that, back in the early days, he would usually have Peter or Gene sing the songs he wrote.
Right.
Yeah.
That is always very interesting.
And it's kind of interesting. Like later, when you jump ahead to 1977, and you hear Ace Frehley do his first lead vocal on the song "Shock Me," and because I guess that's what kind of allowed him to feel more comfortable in his ability as a lead singer. But I think most people think of, for example, think of Parasite as a Gene Simmons song, because Gene is the one singing it. Probably most people think he wrote the song, but oddly enough, if you read the writing credits, it's an Ace Frehley song.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I mean, I can totally understand where Ace is coming from, not being comfortable singing. It's, if you're never really fully feel that you're fully good at something, it's always kind of a challenge to step outside of your shell and comfort zone and do something like that in the public eye. Yeah,
even if you followed, you picked up any of Ace's solo releases in the last few years, I don't think he's a great lead singer, but he's developed into a pretty good one. And what I mean by that is, I think his fans would much rather hear Ace sing lead on his own songs rather than say have somebody like Todd Howarth or Richie Scarlett come in and sing the songs as great as they may be. People want to hear Ace do those songs.
Sure. And if you go see Ace live now, he does quite a few songs where he sings lead on.
Yeah.
Songs that he wrote for Kiss.
And then Ace is getting ready to put out like a volume 2 to his Origins album, which is going to be a collection of cover tunes. And I'm not sure who he's covering this time, but on the volume 1 release, he covered some of his Kiss songs. Like he did we finally get a version of Ace singing Cold Gin on a studio album. We finally got him doing Parasite, so that's kind of a cool thing for Kiss fans that are out there.
Absolutely.
And then now, getting back to Hotter Than Hell, like as the guy that kind of plays the role of Peter Criss, what did you think of Peter as a singer and his drumming performance on that album?
I really like Peter's style of drums. I'm really never disappointed with Peter's style because I'm just infatuated with how he's able to, play a lot of fills, especially live. He plays a lot of fills live, but it doesn't necessarily overtake the song. It more so complements the song, I feel. But I'm a little biased because I'm a drummer, so I'm always looking to hear a bunch of fills. I'm not a groove kind of drummer. I like groove, but growing up in the Peter Criss church, so to speak, he does a lot of fills, so that's just what I'm into.
Yeah,
and Peter's voice in general is just out of this world. Like, I really like his voice. I think he sings songs with a lot of feeling. And a lot of edge to him.
And it's kind of interesting. Like, if you take the song "Strange Ways" off of "Hotter Than Hell," I always thought that was a song that really showcased his drumming ability. For example, as I'm sure you have, if you listen to the song, probably as a drummer, I'm sure you pay a lot of attention to that extended drum solo throughout the song.
You're right. I mean, I don't think in the studio version they had that extended solo because they cut out quite a bit for the final record.
Yeah.
So I don't think I've ever heard his extended drum solo part on that particular song.
Okay. Well, when I say extended, I mean there's a bit of like a little drum solo that goes kind of throughout the song, and I heard when they were making that song, that album, Peter kind of he made the threat, as he did many times, I guess, over the years, that hey, if I don't get to sing that song, if I don't get to do it the way I want to do it, I'm leaving the band. But I will say this: I think on that song he's got a very strong drum performance. His singing is great, and you got that's one of the heavier songs Peter sings. I mean, even like "Strange Ways," obviously, "Black Diamond," and like we've heard him do "Beth," we've heard him do "Hard Luck Woman." So, like you're saying, singing wise, the guy's very capable.
For sure, and I just like guys that have a very distinct voice too, and that's what's so fascinating about Kiss is every guy has a very distinctable voice that when they sing, you know exactly who's singing, and if you were to hear a song on the radio, you could, having heard their voices before, go, well, this kind of sounds like, Peter Criss or something.
Yeah.
And chances are it is.
Which is kind of, it kind of always surprised me that, like, when you look at the 4 solo albums, Peter's was, it sold the least amount. Now, I not necessarily that it was a bad album to my ears, but I do think it was the most different. But I still say, to me, that album really, showed that, Peter was capable of doing more than just Beth. Like I said, even choosing to cover like "Tossin' and Turnin'," that's a great tune to cover, and he really really made it his own, if you know what I mean. But I don't know why people really don't like that album. I think it was a pretty decent album. I think just because maybe of the 4 solo albums, maybe it sounded least like Kiss.
I think that's an accurate assumption, Jason. It doesn't sound like Kiss at all. And for that reason, I think people expected 4 new Kiss records, and what they got was 2 similar Kiss records from Ace and Paul, and then 2 very explorative releases from Gene and Peter. But Peter's record, or solo record from '78, is my favorite of the 4, for sure.
Yeah. And during during your time in Mr. Speed, I was curious if you guys ever performed any of the songs off of "Hotter Than Hell."
We do. We've done "Got to Choose." There was a time where I was going to do "Strange Ways," but I subbed that out for "Hooligan."
Okay.
What else? I mean, Mr. Speed's been around for 25 years, so I've only been in Mr. Speed for, I believe I'm approaching my 4th year.
Wow. Wow.
And obviously, in 25 years, you're able to cover a lot of different music, and Mr. Speed is the type of Kiss tribute that's going to cover all the obscure songs. That's kind of what our like Easter egg is in our show, where we'll throw in maybe 2 or 3 songs that you really wouldn't hear any other Kiss tributes try to attempt.
Yeah, that's kind of a cool
for
thing.
For a number of different reasons, but that's kind of our thing, and I'm sure Rich and any of the old members of Mr. Speed have covered probably almost every song off of "Hotter Than Hell" at this point.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of a cool thing about what bands like you guys do, because well, you take a band like Kiss, they've been doing it over 40 years, so you got quite a catalog of music to choose from, and it's kind of cool that what people fail to realize when they go see a tribute band, a lot of people got that misconception. I think you and I talked about this last time that musicians that play in tribute bands, they're failed musicians, they're just playing other people's music. But there's really an art to what you do. I mean, you got to be somewhat of a decent musician to first of all get up there and play other people's music. You got to, you're paying tribute, so you got to have somewhat of a musical skill to do what you do, and then to go the extra mile to get dressed up like the guys in the band. Because it'd be one thing to go see a band where you guys are just in your jeans and t-shirts and you're just up there strumming your guitars and playing the Kiss music, compared to what Mr. Speed does, which you really look the part. I mean, even it's funny, like your frontman, Rich. I've talked to him and interviewed him several times over the years, and I tell you, the guy, just his way he talks and he approaches himself, even when he's out of the makeup, he talks and he acts like Paul Stanley. I mean, I'm convinced, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I don't think Rich is necessarily like Paul so much out of the makeup. Rich is, I've never met Paul or hung out with Paul when he's not, ever. I met Paul for 3 seconds on a Kiss Cruise 6, but I didn't get to talk to him. I can only base it off of interviews, and I think someone in an interview isn't necessarily their true self.
Yeah.
Rich is a goofy guy, just like me, and just like every other member of Mr. Speed.
I guess.
And crew.
Yeah, I guess. Like when you look at Rich in his Paul Stanley makeup, I mean, you could tell, for example, this guy is serious about what he does. I mean, he's got the Paul Stanley persona down, and I guess what I'm saying, even when I've seen photos of him out of makeup and stuff, and he's talking about Mr. Speed, he's into promoting his band just as much as Paul Stanley is, if you know what I mean. I mean,
for sure. Yeah, we take our band very seriously, and though we have a great time, like, it's kind of an extension of ourselves, and that may sound cheesy because it's really not our creation per se. Obviously, we're using Kiss as a template, but it's kind of how far do you want to take it and how inspired do you want to be. So we're having a really good time with it, but at the same time, we take it very seriously.
I mean, to me, it's rock and roll theater. That's how I kind of describe it to people. Because, again, let's talk about Kiss for a minute. They're wrapping up their career. Supposedly, this is their final farewell tour. And if that is indeed, I mean, the guys are getting they're almost 70 years old. Gene and Paul and them, and if that is indeed the case, I mean, there are going to be some people in the world that'll never get to see Kiss perform. At one point, and then going to see a band like Mr. Speed, that's as close as they're going to get it. Or in other cases, you'll have people come to a Mr. Speed show, and you guys are so good at what you do that it almost makes these diehard Kiss fans think, you know what? When I went to see Mr. Speed last night, man, it took me back to the very first time I saw a Kiss show. It took me back to the very first time I heard a Kiss song on the radio or whatever, and that's what a lot of these tribute bands are all about, if you know what I mean.
For sure. It's always interesting to see what different Kiss tributes have to offer. There's a great Kiss tribute over in Hungary called Kiss Forever Band, and they like to do the current Kiss, or actually the Monster era of Kiss, and they do a very great job of it. And when I approach my role, I just try to be like mid-70s Peter, because that's just something you can't see anymore. Yeah. And my idea of a tribute is seeing a band or an artist that you're not able to see anymore. And for me, Peter Criss was, on fire in like 1977. Yeah. So that's just what I try to do, and that's personally my goal, and that's not everyone else's goal. Yeah. But in Mr. Speed, we definitely try to cover all eras of Kiss musically, but obviously stick to a certain era costume-wise. Yeah, I mean, like many people who are Kiss fans like us, Quinton, I got some of my favorite songs, and there's some songs I'm not, that I'm not a huge fan of, but overall, I would say the one thing that has kept Kiss going all these years, I would say, is obviously Gene and Paul's ability, not just to perform a material, but I think they're pretty decent. Excuse me for saying so. Pretty decent songwriters.
I mean, look at the catalog of music they got, and that's why these guys have been able to do it for 40 years. And everybody's kind of contributed something to the band, but I will say Gene and Paul have been the two kind of constants for whatever reason. They sing the majority of his songs, they write the majority of his songs, and even, okay, yeah, you can say, okay, like we're talking about Hotter Than Hell tonight, okay, if you put, like, let's say Hotter Than Hell next to, let's say, Animalize or Lick It Up, it's almost like listening to two different bands, but over the course of their history, I'm just as big of a fan as Lick It Up as I am, let's say, of anything Kiss did in the 70s.
I agree. I concur.
Because somehow it's all Kiss, if you know what I mean. And that's why people can say what they want about Vinnie Vincent, but even that guy contributed something. Maybe not as much as say Gene or Paul, but that one album is one of the albums people still kind of point to. And Lick It Up, I think, is a very important album for the simple fact that, kind of like Paul Stanley said over here, okay, we had to do that album. We had to take the makeup off at that time to kind of prove that the success was not just about the makeup.
Right. Yeah. I mean, look at Vinnie Vincent. He was definitely a driving force for developing their sound in the 80s. I mean, along with, 80s hair metal, but yeah. I feel like he was the foundation for songwriting that helped springboard other albums.
Yeah, yeah.
And with Gene and Paul, I mean, it's basically always been their band.
Yeah.
It's the band that they formed, and though Ace and Peter are the original members, Gene and Paul basically were the people who stuck their necks out the most, I feel.
Yeah, I would totally agree. Now, as a Kiss fan yourself, Quinton, we've been talking about this being the 45th anniversary of both the debut Kiss album, Hotter Than Hell. Now, I would kind of agree with a lot of what you're saying as far as I feel that between the two albums, I like both albums. Probably the debut album stands up better because let's look at the songs on that album. You got like Nothing to Lose, Firehouse, Black Diamond, Strutter, and the point I'm making with this is overall the songs on that album, many of them are still in the set list today, and I don't know why that is. Why both songs have kind of really stuck with people more than the songs on Hotter Than Hell. Now probably the only song you might ever hear Kiss doing off Hotter Than Hell is probably the title track, which I understand Paul Stanley was a real big Free fan, and that was kind of his nod to Free.
Yes, I find it interesting because I've recently gone back to re-listen to the entire catalog with a bandmate of mine in my other band, Crestfall, and we're kind of just geeking out over music stuff.
Yeah.
But what I explained to my bandmate was that in Hotter Than Hell, a lot of those albums are used in their acoustic sets when they used to do the acoustic pre-shows in the meet and greets, or, for example, like Kiss Cruise 9 is now in full swing, and I'm willing to bet that at the acoustic set, if they did one, or the live set even, that they did Coming Home, they did Going Blind, they did Strange Ways when I was on the cruise. Quite a few of those songs are foundational songs for Kiss, and
it's kind of interesting you make that point. I'll tell you why, because if you remember when they released back in 1995 the Unplugged album, that album gave some of those songs like a life that they had never previously had. For example, I remember watching MTV's Unplugged, and when that aired, and one of the main songs that really was heavily showcased is Got to Choose. It kind of gave that songs like Got to Choose, Watching You, Coming Home. Those three tunes that never really received heavy airplay back in the day, once they released MTV Unplugged, a lot of the fans, they really latched onto those songs, and it kind of gave those songs a new life, and I thought that was kind of interesting.
Right. I don't believe that they did Watching You on MTV Unplugged, but
okay.
I get what you're saying, but also, those were concert staples in their early 70s years. I mean, Alive is comprised heavily of Hotter Than Hell tunes. But it was also a different time for them. Like, they were a dangerous band back then. And, they wore all leather. It was a very different vibe than that of, let's say, like Destroyer, when they were trying to get a little more conceptual, I feel.
Yeah, and like where on the debut album, I feel a lot of those, like I said, those are really. It's funny you're going back 45 years, and a lot of that stuff is still on the set list. I mean, both songs really remain classic, and then a lot of the stuff on Hotter Than Hell. I don't know if it was due to producers they were working with. I don't know if it was due to them just kind of going into the studio and just kind of seeing what comes out, and this is what we're writing right now, or because they're pretty decent songs. I'll give you an example. I always love, although I'm sure there are many Kiss fans have no idea what I'm talking about. There's a song on Hotter Than Hell called, that Gene sings lead on, it's called All the Way. I feel that's one tune, for example, in my mind, is very underrated. Many Kiss fans probably never heard the song, but it's a great little tune, and I don't know why I didn't ever receive more love. That's just my thought. Then you got the song, another song I love on there is Mainline, and I'll tell you a funny story about Mainline. That's a Peter Criss tune. Obviously, he wrote it. Now, Gene and Paul, being the straight guys that they are, I don't think they have any idea, or maybe when they recorded, they didn't have any idea that he is singing almost about. It's almost like Peter's love affair with his drug of choice, which was cocaine, I guess. I've heard that over the years, and I remember when I first heard this song, I thought, oh, this is a great little fun tune, and he's singing about his girl or whatever. But that's not the case.
It's ironic, isn't it?
Yeah.
And also interesting how songs can have different metaphors that could be taken in many different ways. I think that's the sign of a really great song.
Yeah, and see, that's the thing to me is when you because I believe probably back in the day, if a record company had any idea that this was a song about a drug, they'd probably say, we can't have anything like that on the album. And like you said, that's a sign of a guy that can write a pretty good tune. That because a lot of times that's the key to being a kind of a pretty good songwriter, is being able to have a use of metaphors and people being able to figure out what you're talking about.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and so I do agree with you that that the songs, I think, on Hotter Than Hell, they weren't as polished maybe as on the stuff on the debut album, but I think if people give it a fair little listen, they won't be really too disappointed. And it's almost like, because a lot of those songs, people, in my mind, they kind of remain really underrated. And a lot of people maybe haven't heard those songs as much as, say, the stuff on the debut album. It would almost be like hearing a new Kiss album, if you know what I mean.
Perhaps. What people also have to keep in mind is the fact that that album was put out 6 months after the first album. And what that means is they didn't have 6 months to write that album. That means they basically probably had a month to write the album, lyrically and musically.
Yeah.
And then go record it in probably a week or two's time, and then have it mixed, and then mastered, and then printed and distributed. So what you forget when you see a 6 month time span is that they didn't have a full 6 months to write it. They had a very short amount of time to write it, and then all these other things have to take place in order for an album to be on store shelves in a 6 month time span.
Yeah. Back in the day, Kiss, like they don't do that these days, but Kiss back in the day, they would release like almost 2 albums a year, for all through the 70s, and I think that's kind of interesting. Like when you compare even the debut album, Hotter Hell, by the time they got to Dress to Kill. I mean, Dress to Kill is a little bit of a raw album, but I just I don't know that they're great songs. Don't get me wrong, but I think they were really still kind of trying to develop their songwriting, because a lot of people think the only great song on there is Rock and Roll All Night, but even it took like another till putting out Kiss Alive, and that's when that song really kind of took over the airways and became the massive hit that it is today.
For sure.
Yeah. And now I want to talk a little bit, like I said, you're also in a band, as you mentioned, in addition to Mr. Speed, Crestfall, that does like original music. And I will say, being that you play in a Kiss tribute band, I'm guilty of kind of thinking, okay, this other band's probably going to be some type of like hard rock metal band. And to me, it almost it has a great kind. It's really different, obviously, than what you're doing with Mr. Speed. It is original music, like I said, and you guys posted a new video up, so we can talk a little bit about that. But watching that and listening to the song, I thought, wow, this is like a great kind of modern rock band with kind of like an alternative edge to it. And I don't know if you agree with that description. If not, you can tell me how you feel that you guys sound overall.
Yeah, so with that band, with Crestfall, first of all, it's spelled Krestfall for anyone who would be curious of the spelling.
Yeah.
I've always wanted to be in an original band, and I've been in a few in the past, but none of them really... there was always something that wasn't quite right with any of them, and that's no disrespect to any of the past members, but the stars didn't quite align with that, and I feel really good about this band, and everyone's about the same age, everyone has a great look to them, everyone's very proficient on their instruments and pretty proficient on their vocals, and it's kind of a dream team of guys that I think got together and decided, you know what, we're not getting any younger, and we should probably put out some music of our own that we're pretty proud of. So we definitely have a modern rock sound.
Yeah.
We're all a fan of very different things. Our bass player is kind of our punk alternative guy.
Oh, cool.
I'm the progressive metal, old school rock guy. Our lead singer obviously has roots in classic rock, but is a little more willing to experiment and listen to some very heavy music. And then our other guitar player is very eclectic in his style as well. But even outside of the rock realm, we all listen to a variety of different styles that can come into influence with our songs. So that's kind of that.
That's kind of cool because, I've always been a fan of like bands that like you said, you have band members where each guy kind of brings something different to the table. I mean, you could be talking about any band. We could be talking about Def Leppard, Kiss, Motley Crue, even like Crestfall, like we're talking about right now. And every person in the band brings something to the table. I don't care how minute or how major it is. Everybody kind of brings something to the table. And I think when you got a group of guys like that who you're all equally talented. I mean, like for example, Quinton, you're a drummer and you're a guy that can also not only just play the drums, but you can write and you can sing. So that's unique in itself. And then you got a guy who's maybe into punk. So that's cool that when you guys go in the studio, that hey, let's try to do a punk song. Let's do a ballad. Let's do something kind of with a modern rock edge or whatever the case may be. And then when people check the stuff out or they put on the album, hey, this is really a cool sounding band.
Right. Yeah. There's no harm in having different styles come together to create one awesome thing.
Yeah, and as great as it is to be paying tribute to Kiss and playing to Mr. Speed. Mr. Speed's a great band. They've been doing it like you said, you've been in the last 4 years. They've been doing it for over close to 20 years as far as I know. And so there's a huge love for Mr. Speed out there. But as a musician, it's also cool to kind of have kind of your other gig where you can go and create original music. That's got to be a great feeling.
Indeed. And to speak to how it differs from Mr. Speed, I've always tried to have any band I'm a part of be different from the other band that I'm in.
Yeah.
And I didn't really want Crestfall to have any sort of connection to Mr. Speed because I think that's very disrespectful
To both bands.
To both bands. It's just not fair. Then there's blurred lines and there's no separation between the two outlets. So
And I think the fact that each band has their own fan base speaks volumes because it just shows you there's room for you to do both, if you know what I mean.
Indeed.
And now
there's always room to do more.
And now, as far as the guys that are in the band with you now, was this an existing band that you joined? Is this something that you knew these guys from the local music scene? You guys all got in your room and say, hey, let's form a band together. Let's do something.
This was built from the ground up.
Great.
And
That's cool.
I've known the lead singer and lead guitarist for a number of years and have been barking up his tree to start something, but he's a few years younger than me, so the timing just wasn't right. And as of last year, in winter of 2017, about this time, we got in touch with each other again and kind of decided this was the right time for us to both see if working together was a possibility. So we got together and exchanged some ideas, jammed in a garage, and had some some chemistry, had some sparkage, and from there we were like, you know what, let's find some other members. So luckily he knows, found our 2 other members from one is from his other band, which is a cover band in Oshkosh, Wisconsin, and then his best friend is the bass player.
Wow.
So the band came together fairly quickly, and we all get along tremendously well. We're all very good friends.
That's cool.
And I think that's a great foundation for an existing band, is if you can be friends with your members.
Oh yeah. I mean that plays a big role. Now, obviously, I always love to ask people, because I know one of the hardest things in forming a band is coming up with the name. And now I got to ask, because Crustfall is an interesting name. I can't really kind of put my finger on what it means. So, talk a little bit about coming up with the name and how you guys did that.
We spent probably, well, let's just say a lot of time coming up with different names. Some were really awful and others were super awful. And we narrowed it down to a few, maybe 3. And it was actually our bass player, Noah, who came up with the name Crustfall. It's derived from the word crestfallen, which means kind of, depressed, distressed, upset. And at first I really wasn't a fan of the name, because being a Kiss fan, Kiss generally represents all things positive and all things imaginative.
Upbeat, yeah.
I've always tried to base any band I'm in off of the Kiss template, so to speak, of what I'm into. But as we started writing more and more, the name started becoming more connected with the music. And that's not to say that our music is sad in any way, but our music comes from the heart and what we've experienced in our lives and what we feel.
Yeah.
And growing up in this era and at age 20 is a interesting and difficult time from experience. So I want to say the name fits all 4 of us very well.
And the interesting thing about that too is, if you think about it, it's kind of interesting, and I'm sure you know this as a performing musician, even just a music fan, that music is something that, talking about depression for a minute, people that are feeling down and stuff, music, just listening to music or whatever, or even being a musician like yourself, Quinton, that creates and writes music, oftentimes, music is used as a tool to kind of somebody's feeling depressed, you put on a great album, great tune, and they forget it. They start feeling uplifted. They forget about the depression, even if it's just for a brief minute or two. And oftentimes, like you see even today in the world, when there's like some major catastrophe, or even like some of these recent hurricanes and stuff, a lot of times they'll have like these special concerts and that to raise money, and all these great bands come together, for a worthy cause. And oftentimes music can be used as a tool to lift people up and just bring everybody together.
Indeed, that's the beautiful part of it. And I was going to have something to add, but I can't add to that. You basically took the words out of my mouth. So. And
I will just say this about the name. See, like we were saying earlier, when you come up with a name, that's one of the hardest things I understand is to come up with the band name. And while people may be like, what is Crustfall? Okay, I definitely guarantee you, it hasn't been copyrighted until you guys. I definitely guarantee, I can almost guarantee there's no other band out there with that name. So that's a unique thing in itself.
It is. It was definitely a challenge when coming up with these names of like, oh, well, this band already exists, or this name already exists. I believe Crustfall is only used in some video game.
And so I almost guarantee anytime anybody puts that name in a search, you guys automatically are probably the first thing that comes up, and that's a pretty cool thing for a band out there seeking a fan base,
Indeed, and we've only been around we're approaching our first year of existence, because there's some time where you need to sort things out and build, your brand. And though the singer and I got together in 2017, we really didn't debut anything until about July of 2018.
So once you guys got together and you got everybody in the band, I was curious, what was the time period from the time the band was all together and everybody was hired? You guys kind of got to know each other. Did you go out and start writing the songs right away? What was the point from when you had a group of songs out? Okay, we're ready to go play our first show.
Good question. So the timeline would be when our lead singer, his name is Zach. Zach and I got together in the winter of 2017, and we exchanged ideas, and we wrote a couple songs together based on some rough demos that he had, as basically planting the seed of like, okay, well, I like this, and let's try this out, and then it obviously through a few rounds of playing the song morphs into a full song and develops different parts. And Zach's very proficient with his recording capabilities when it comes to demoing a song. So he would we'd demo a song, he'd go home, he'd mix it together, and then he'd send it to me, and it gives us some breathing room and some time to really think, sit back and listen to the song and decide, well, maybe this part should be shortened, or we should add a section here, and really nitpick what we want to put into the song. So we had maybe a batch of 3 songs that we wrote that we showed the other 2 joining members, and they're like, yeah, these are cool, so we learned those. But at that time, Zach is always writing, and Zach is generally the guy who comes to the band with half of the ideas.
Yeah.
Like half songs, then he's like, here, I got this idea, let's sort it out and see if we can turn it into something. And as we progress more and more, he's actually coming with full songs, and 80% of the song remains the same, while maybe 20% gets changed because either I want to change the tempo of beat or add in some fills, or we all decide that maybe a section needs to get shortened, or something lyrically needs to be changed, or everyone gets to put their dirty hands in it.
Yeah.
And that's what's really exciting, because a lot of other bands, members don't get a say.
Yeah.
But in Crestfall, everyone gets a say, and we work on a majority rules mentality unless it's a very important decision.
Yeah. Now, you guys are still early in your...
We wanted to happen, so...
Yeah, you guys are still
kind of... It was basically, let's write a song that's kind of all of us involved, and that would be our first single, titled Liar. But, again, that's basically Zach writing the majority of it, and then a small percentage of us getting our hands on it and kind of adding different things. But our sound has drastically changed since our first single to the EP we just released at the middle of this year, and we recently released a music video on Halloween.
See Them Run, correct?
Yep, See Them Run, and you can catch it on YouTube at the moment.
Yeah.
But the sound of that, definitely modern rock, very high energy. It's very polished.
Yeah.
But we're actually planning to write and record a new EP come March of 2020 that should be released hopefully in the fall of 2020. And the sonic qualities of that are going to be drastically different from the EP that I just mentioned. So
now the current EP, like how many songs do people get on that?
It's just 2.
Oh, 2. Okay.
It was the first time that we went into like a full-fledged studio, and that's no disrespect to the first studio that we went to, because that is a full-fledged studio, but everything was very rushed. We were on a short timeline, and we kind of wanted to up our game, so we reached out to a couple friends we knew. I have a friend in a band called Blacktop Mojo, whose name is Chuck Wepfer, and he recommended a gentleman by the name of Jordan Pop to us, who is a producer down in Batavia, Illinois. And he's worked with quite a few bands that we're fans of. So
how cool is that?
I've heard great things about a studio called Kiwi Audio, which is obviously located in Batavia, Illinois. And we're like, you know what? Let's get some money together. Let's see what we can do with these 2 songs that kind of sound like they fit with his style.
Cool.
It was an awesome experience. We learned a great deal of what goes into recording a very intense couple of songs, and now that's helped springboard the writing process and the planning process for 2020 for us.
That's cool. Now, again, you guys are that's further proof you guys are in kind of your infancy. But the cool thing, like you tell me, okay, we got 2 tracks people have heard so far, and one sounds a little more polished than the other. Was done in more of a professional studio, but that right there just kind of shows the evolution of the band. This is where we started. This is where we're going now. Now, the next obvious question would be, so a lot of people that go see you live, they've only heard but 2 songs. So, what's that like for these fans come to the shows and a lot of the material they've never even heard before? That's got to be a pretty cool thing. It's a kind of an opportunity for you guys to kind of showcase your material and kind of get the crowd's feedback, and you kind of can see if they like what you guys are doing or not.
Indeed. The way our live shows go is we're kind of, like you said, in an infancy stage. So we wanted to play shows by ourselves. We've all been in cover bands for a number of years.
Yeah.
Or tribute bands, and we didn't really want to deal with the multi-band bills in somebody's basement for no money. I really wasn't about that kind of show, and none of us are. And at some point, we're going to have to suck it up and play shows like that.
Yeah.
And that's not to say that those shows can't be super cool, because there's a certain energy that pertains around those shows. But we're used to the cover band vibe, so we're a little spoiled. So we decided, you know what, we're going to learn 50 cover songs that fit the style that we're trying to write for. So we play bands like Avenged Sevenfold or Ghost or Five Finger Death Punch, a lot of modern rock songs that in Wisconsin not a lot of bands cover, specifically as in a whole night of music. But also even countrywide, I don't see modern rock bands really pop up, and I'm not sure why. Maybe because it's a popular genre at this time. But that's kind of our goal, is we're trying to play shows solely ourselves, and that's what our night is comprised of. It's comprised of probably 25% originals and then 75% covers. And it's really not by choice, it's more so out of necessity, because any money we make goes straight back into the band.
Wow. And so, what type of shows have you been playing? I mean, have you guys been playing like little clubs for, private parties? For, I was just kind of curious.
We're playing definitely higher end bars and clubs. At the end of this year, we'll be opening for Buck Cherry in Arena in Oshkosh, and that's super exciting.
Pretty major right there. That's you put the little star next to, on your chart there.
Absolutely, it's a great, something for the press kit for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And see, the thing that I kind of have a feeling, like I said, you guys are kind of just getting in the wheelhouse. Kind of like you said, you're still creating the brand. You're still writing new tunes, and that's great, because I'll tell you, just based off the video for See Them Run. I mean, I watched the video from start to finish. Great sounding tune. You guys do a great job performing in the video, to the sense that I saw that video. It's like what I was left feeling is, that's a band that I would want to go see live if they came to my town. So I think the video really accomplished what it set out to accomplish. If you know what I mean.
Thank you very much. That means a lot.
Yeah, and talk a little bit about the video. I mean, how did you guys? Was that like? Did it take you hours and hours to put it together, or what was the creative process as far as filming it and everything?
It was kind of interesting, because, like you've kind of said, as I'm going to say, we're in a transitional period where we're trying to not be known as a cover band. We're trying to be specifically known as an original band. So we're taking these steps to make sure that that's very apparent to our audience. And doing this music video was certainly one of them. And the process of that was getting together and deciding, okay, well, what do we want this next music video to be about? Do we want just us performing, or do we want a concept? And we got in touch with a young man whose name is Eddie Curran, out of Wisconsin as well. He has a business called Enterprise Films, and he's the man who is responsible for the video looking as awesome as it is. So in talking with him, he said there's a couple different options you can take. You can have a performance video, or you can have a concept video, and there's a variety of different styles to choose from. So it's not necessarily picking a template, but it's more so picking an avenue and then seeing how much you want to explore it. So we got together as a band in a coffee shop and basically fleshed out a script for the video, what we wanted to happen at each section. Like verse 1, we're going to have these scenes happen, and verse 2 is going to have this happen. And we sort of developed this cult vibe which doesn't necessarily pertain to the song exactly, but it fits well, and it's, I think, a very interesting and imaginative concept that no one else is really exploring at the moment.
Yeah.
So
and talking
we found
about
this really cool mask online.
Wow.
And started piecing together the costume for what we're calling the Dark Wittress.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
from there, we rented out a theater in Oshkosh, Wisconsin, and we spent at least, I would say, 16 hours filming.
Wow.
Which is a very long day, and we didn't think it would take that long. But what's fun about being in the band right now is we're learning so many different things and learning what to do and what not to do in the future. So
having that many shooting a video that many hours, I would imagine you guys got a lot of extra footage that you can kind of put away in the vault, so to speak, to use at a later time, maybe.
I haven't even thought about that. I mean, I thought about it, but I haven't really reached out to the director to see if there's a way to get all that extra footage. I'm sure he probably deleted it by now. But
wow.
It would be nice to have, but it would probably take up like 4 different hard drives.
Yeah, I'd imagine. I mean, see, as a Kiss fan, that's one thing I always love. Like, if you go back and watch any of those Kiss Street videos, like, back in the day, they didn't know technology would become what it is today, but they pretty much filmed almost everything they ever did. They've got it somewhere on tape, and it's amazing. Even if you go look at a lot of that old black and white footage, like from 1974, 75, I mean, it just looks amazing. And as a Kiss fan, that's the stuff I just love. It doesn't necessarily have to be professionally shot stuff, but it's so cool looking.
It would be super cool to see that, but it's probably unpolished and to a low caliber standard that Paul or Gene have that we'll probably never see it. And to be fair, too, we know quite a bit about Kiss's personal lives.
Yeah.
They probably want something for themselves, and I can completely relate.
Yeah. Now, I guess the point I was trying to make, too, is being that you guys are kind of just in your transitional phase and you're trying to make it, create the songs and really get more of a following, I think it would be kind of cool. I don't know if you guys have given this any thought to this. I'm not telling you how to run your band, just a suggestion. I think as a fan, it would be kind of cool to, okay, we're going to the studio, maybe shoot the band at a rehearsal or something, put that up on the Facebook page or something. And the thing is, like, it's kind of interesting. I will tell you, I followed you, since my first contact, a couple years back, Quinton, and then Mr. Speed and Chris Kufahl, and it's kind of interesting. I had no idea that Chris Kufahl, I thought you guys were, like you said, you're primarily a original band. I had no idea that you guys, when you do shows, that you do cover tunes, but that's cool because the type of material you're telling me you cover, a lot of fans might go to a Chris Kufahl show and they might not have any idea that's a cover tune, if you know what I mean. For example, early on in Metallica's career, they did a lot of Diamond Head covers. And I've heard Lars Ulrich talk over years that we were doing that stuff, and a lot of people thought those were Metallica songs. No, they're Diamond Head songs.
Right, and we're actually experiencing a similar thing. Oh, there's a blurred line as to what's a cover and what's an original.
Yeah.
So we try really hard in our shows to let the audience know that, hey, this next song, or the song you just heard, is an original song we wrote, not because we think our songs are the best, or that they are even, to the same caliber as some of these other incredible songs that we cover, but, sonically we strategically pick songs that sound like the sound we're going for.
Yeah, and I guess my point I was trying to make is, like, the thing about going to see a band covering another band's material. For example, who at this point in time hasn't heard like Stairway to Heaven or Smoke on the Water thousands and thousands of times. Me as a fan is if I go and see a band cover a song, it'd be much cooler, maybe, just in my mind. I mean, I love Smoke on the Water, I love Stairway to Heaven, don't get me wrong, but like we were talking about earlier, Kiss, for example, they have a lot of these great little, like some of the tunes even we were talking about tonight off of Hotter Than Hell. If you go see a Kiss tribute band, I'd love to see maybe somebody not necessarily perform Hotter Than Hell, but maybe perform Got to Choose or Coming Home, one of those little rare tracks. So the fact that you guys are not choosing the obvious songs to cover, I think that's pretty cool, You're giving the audience a little something different.
Indeed. And we spent a lot of time picking those songs as well. It's just a genre, plain and simple, that's not covered by a lot of people because one, I don't think a lot of people can cover it. And two, it's not everyone's favorite genre. But if you think back to when all of these guys who are in cover bands now were starting in their very hopeful original bands playing bars, the cover songs they played were all cover songs that existed at that moment. And I think in Wisconsin and in America in general, that idea has been lost on at least original bands or just bands in general, because where I'm from, there's not really a single band doing what we do in our area, and I love it. Because we're the only game in town. But at the same time, too, it's a double-edged sword because not a lot of people cover it. So there's a lot of, or quite a large audience that's not familiar with, you know, a band like Ghost or a band like Avenged Sevenfold. So they're a little leery of taking a chance on listening to us because it's just something that's unfamiliar. They know they're not going to hear Don't Stop Believin' or Bon Jovi or any band that's been around for the past 30 years.
And, you know, and the cool thing about the stage where you guys are, I would think, is, you know, you're not necessarily at that jaded stage where you have, like, maybe released 4 or 5 albums, and not just the people in the band, but maybe your fan base as well. They've got a preconceived notion of what the band's supposed to sound like, where I think you're at a real cool period. Like you're telling me, okay, we've got these 2 songs we released so far. We're working on writing more tunes. That's kind of where we're at now. Where there's not necessarily you guys, when you write songs right now, there's not necessarily a preconceived notion of what you're supposed to sound like. You're at the point where you can not necessarily say, well, we're not. We would never imagine doing a song like this. That's way out of the Crestfall box, if you know what I mean. You guys are able to kind of just go in there. These are the tunes we read. We're going to go in and record. This is what we're doing. It's not necessarily about having an overall sound, if you know what I mean. This is what we're creating. We're going to see what comes out.
For sure, and we have certain parameters too. You know, we want to be a successful band. We definitely try to write songs that would be played on the radio, but also not cheat ourselves of any musical creativities that may come out when we're writing a song. So
I guess,
I can speak to that this next EP has a song that's close to 7 minutes on it. There's also a song that's just under 4 minutes that they all have their own kind of thing, but they really push the envelope as far as what we've released, and I know it's only been 3 songs, but we're definitely a little more progressive on these newer songs.
And now let me ask you, like you said, your lead singer is this guy Zach, you said, but being that you also, for example, Quinton, can sing, is there any chance we might hear you in the future sing lead on any of these songs, or are you primarily going to leave Zach to doing all the lead singing?
Zach is always going to be our lead singer.
Okay.
But what's so cool about 70s bands and a band like Kiss or Styx is that they had all these different singers. So you have a song like Shout It Out Loud where it's a dual lead. As far as the vocals go, or, you know, other band members chime in on certain phrases, and I definitely instilled that with the Crestfall thing and make it very apparent on every song. It's like, if there's a way we can get all 4 of us singing on it, not just harmony parts, but individually. I'm a really big fan of that because we live in an era right now where rock music is solely focused on the lead singer, and he's the guy who speaks in all the interviews. He's the guy who talks on stage. He's the guy who is credited with basically that band. And though that may be true for a lot of them, as a drummer, it's just kind of, I guess, sickening. And it's not always the case. I've always been a fan of the supergroup, and 70s bands were supergroups, and quite a few 80s bands were supergroups, and that's what I wanted Crestfall to be. So there's definitely one song in particular that I had a major hand in writing in that I said, you know, I'd really like to lend my voice to this, but not necessarily for lead stuff, but for certain key phrases that it's solely just me singing.
That's what made like a band like Queen so great. I mean, let's no denying Freddie Mercury is the master at what he did, but you know, I mean, even from time to time we'd get a Roger Taylor or a Brian May tune, and then like you said, Queen is really the master of that background vocal sound. I mean, just look at a song like Bohemian Rhapsody. If you watch that video, you see all the guys singing and they're doing their part, and it's just amazing. And then even like a band like the Eagles. I mean, that was one of the major bands where you had a drummer that was the lead singer as well.
Right. Yeah, it's super cool, and it's just something that no band is currently really implementing in their songwriting. So I think we have a unique edge on quite a few bands.
And you could probably attest to this, Quinton. Being from time to time, you do some lead singing in Mr. Speed, but I'd imagine it's got to be a pretty hard thing, like in a drummer's case, to be beating those drums and also be able to concentrate on the vocals and everything and singing the lead and doing all that stuff live.
It is. It's very difficult because you have a voice can't necessarily project as loud as drums can. And
yeah.
I personally hit my drums as hard as I can because that's the way rock drumming should be. But then the microphone is going to pick up all those sound waves, so you struggle with. As a sound man, I can imagine it's very frustrating to
mix the stuff,
mix and mic a singing drummer because of those variables. But luckily for Peter Criss, he belted out a lot of his songs.
Yeah.
And it should hopefully make the sound man's job a little easier.
Well, and I think he's suffering it from now because I mean, not just singing and all that, but I mean, he beat those drums all those years, and I mean, from what I understand, he can't really perform anymore because he suffers from, I guess, like a lot of drummers, carpal tunnel or something like that. But he he's done it all, and I think he's got his legacy, and people will always be a Peter Criss Kiss fan. And before we wrap this up, I will say you made a very good point there about like that's one thing I always loved about Kiss, especially on all those early albums, the way like Gene and Paul they would mix their vocals together. I mean, even if you go back to the very first Kiss album, like on the song "Kissin' Time," for example, you could hear Peter, you could hear Gene, you could hear Paul. Their vocals would all mix together. You could hear them throughout the song. Even like on the song "Let Me Know," you had Gene and Paul, and that's what I think. That's why I think they did that on "Destroyer," like you said, shout out, and then for years Gene and Paul would just perform their own material they'd write. They stopped doing that, and I think that's what made "Revenge" like a great comeback album from him, because a lot of those tunes, you'd hear Paul and Gene, they'd mix their vocals together. Even like on a song like "God Gave Rock and Roll to You," and I'm like, that's great. Why did you guys stop doing that?
Yeah, it's just super unique. It's super fun, and it's not a lot of bands are capable of doing that. So why not flaunt it if you can do it?
Yeah. Well, Quinton, I know it's getting late where you are, so we're going to wrap this up. And I want to thank you so much for taking time to talk to me again. And I would love to talk to you again down the line, and we'll do this again. And I just want to put it out there that I really want to follow Crestfall and kind of follow you guys' career. So as the band develops and you guys get more tunes out there, if you feel the need to reach out, I'd be more than happy to help you guys promote that, because I think just from what I can see on the Facebook page and like I said, the new video, you guys got a lot of potential, and I think once you get more material out there, the fan base is only going to grow.
Thank you so much. That would be awesome. If I could plug for a sec.
Sure.
For those watching, Mr. Speed, you can catch us online at MrSpeedOnline.com. Also on Facebook at Facebook.com/Mr. Speed Online. We're also on Instagram, which is Mr_Speed_Kiss Tribute or Kiss_Tribute. If you punch it in, you'll find it. Speaking to Crestfall, we don't have a website, but you can catch us on Facebook at Facebook.com/Crestfall. Again, the band name is spelled KRESTFALL. We're also on Instagram under Crestfall. We have a Twitter as well, and an Instagram at Crestfall Band.
Okay, thanks so much,
So that's all I got.
Quinton, and we will let you know the minute the interview...